Whoa, we are here with a emergency FutureSox RoundUp podcast. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am joined by Dylan Barnas today. We're here for one reason and one reason only. We are not going to beat around the bush. Garrett Crochet was traded to the Boston Red Sox in exchange for 4 prospects this afternoon for some people. We knew this was coming, but this is now, the first step in what's going to be an offseason of retooling this roster, planning for 2026 and beyond, really. And the reality is, we know this is the situation the White Sox are in, and we are now ready to see what this leads to. And I think Crochet was the first step. We knew it was going to happen, and I think what really has happened in the last few days with the winter meetings, Juan Soto signs with the Mets on Sunday, just to give a little recap, right? And then the Yankees respond by signing Max Fried to a $212 million deal, which is insane for what I think most people were projecting Max Fried to be getting in free agency. So then, in response to the Yankees signing Max Fried yesterday, the Red Sox turn around and say, hey, we need our ace. We still need our ace, and Corbin Burns, his price is going to be astronomical after what Snell and Fried got. So instead of even waiting for the Corbin Burns market to play out, the Red Sox said, hey, let's just do it. I have said from the start, you have said from the start, the Red Sox were a very logical fit for the White Sox. They have a ton of hitting prospects. They just absolutely need an ace to even have a chance to contend in 2025. That's something the Red Sox have needed for a few years. They find their ace, Garrett Crochet, heading to Boston. Dylan, your initial reaction to when this deal struck this morning?
When it first came out that Teal was going to be the headliner, I was like, all right, that's kind of like, we'll see what the rest of the package looked like. But I was fully expecting Campbell, Mayer. I was holding out hope for Roman Anthony. I know it wasn't likely, but I was holding out. Maybe it would have happened. But when I saw Braden Montgomery was the second piece, I was like, okay, that is where the deal is made. I was in love with him in the draft cycle last year. He was the Red Sox first round pick in 2024. And sent over their first, have liked him since like February of this year. Whenever like the college baseball season got underway, I was like, okay, this is a guy. And when he fell to the Red Sox at 14, I was stunned because I wanted him at 5, and getting him at 14 was great value. But I think that we are starting to see like a true team shape up in the future, because I mean, Kyle Teal and Edgar Caro, that's 2 solid catchers, and then Braden Montgomery is a stereotypical right fielder, big power, big arm, and he has a chance to be a right fielder for a team that hasn't had a right fielder since Jermaine Dye.
Yep. Yeah, 100%, man. That was my reaction as well. I think Teal is an interesting but slightly odd fit. I think at the end of the day, though, the talent is there. You see a guy that is, for a catcher, a premium bat, right? And someone who even at first base could potentially be a premium hitter, right? Like that's somebody who I think you can see being an elite hitter. My reaction there was like, where is it a bad thing to have 2 catchers and 2 catchers that are both young and talented? At the end of the day, no. And like, I get that it's a little weird because you think like, oh, it'd be better to have a guy that, slots into shortstop like Marcelo Meyer, or slots into second base like Christian Campbell, right? Like, yes, those fits are better and a little bit more clear, but at the same time, having 2 guys that can catch, and neither one is necessarily proven to be an elite defensive catcher at this point, but having 2 guys that can be catchers for a team that both have the upside to be, above average big league hitters is not a bad thing. And the reality is the White Sox don't have a first baseman as well. So if you end up in a situation where you're platooning Edgar Caro and Kyle Teal at first base and catcher, I honestly don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's pretty good value and pretty impressive. And then, like you said with Montgomery, like we thought there was a real chance he'd go number 5, especially pre-injury. I think before he broke his ankle in the College World Series, I think there was a real shot he was going to go number 5 to the White Sox, because he's that powerful switch hitting right field upside guy that the White Sox, like you said, have not had in decade plus, right? Long time. So I think with Braden Montgomery, like, yeah, he's going to take some time. And I think with him, you're gonna have to be a little patient because you need to get him back in baseball shape. He hasn't played in a game, and, it's going to be almost a year before he plays in between when he played in his last game and when he starts in, April, right? So you got to be patient. He's not an immediate right field option, but you're looking at Braden Montgomery as your potential 2026 right fielder at some point, right? And then Kyle Teal is a guy who could be up this year, should be up this year, right? I think Kyle Teal, the expectation is he'd be up, not to start the season probably, but if Caro breaks camp, let's say Teal could be up in July easily, and then you've got a catching tandem, first base catching tandem potentially, that could be really impressive. So you get your 2 bats. And then from there, it goes to a Chase Meadroth, who is someone that I think the upside's a little capped with him. I think he's definitely a little more of a, you know, could be a piece, like could be a decent piece, but at the same time, in terms of where he's at in his trajectory and his growth, Meadroth is a guy who should be up this year, probably starts opening day. I think when I look at him, I look at a guy who, you know, has played multiple different spots in the infield, had an over 400 on base percentage last year in AAA, takes a lot of walks, a really patient hitter, and someone who you can at least get good at bats from pretty soon, I think. And then in a Wilkeman Gonzalez, sorry, I think I might have butchered the name there, but you know, he is a young arm, some upside there. I need to do some more looking into it. I think Ian Eskridge, our guy at FutureSox, said he really liked what he saw last year in some of the games he watched of his. So I think that's a piece, right? It's another guy to add in the fire of the White Sox variety of really talented, you know, pitching system, right? I would have loved if they could have gotten one of those, you know, Yolandine Cespedes or Franklin Arias, but I think once you had those top two in there, it was going to be two lesser pieces, with one being big league ready and one being an arm in Gonzalez, who can kind of be one of those project arms to add into the mix of a ton of impressive arms within the White Sox system.
Yeah, with Meadroth, I think that he is likely the opening day second baseman, if I had to guess right now. Maybe he might end up at short if they think that Colson isn't ready, but I think that no matter what, he's going to be on the infield come opening day.
Yeah,
but he like you said, puts together great at bats. His K percentage has fallen every year in the last 3 years, while his walk rate has gone up. So signs of improvement there. And of all qualified minor league hitters, he has the second lowest swing and miss rate in the entire minor leagues. So he's a good contact guy, not going to be much impact, but that's why you have a guy like Braden Montgomery in the deal too.
Right. So what I want to take it back a little bit from the Stoic players just to where we're at with this trade. My take on this is that no matter what happened, White Sox fans were not going to be happy. No matter what happened 100%. In this trade, there was very low likelihood that White Sox fans were going to look at a trade package and say, "Oh my God, the White Sox nailed this. Chris Getz nailed this." What I saw instantly was people reacting and saying, you know, why Kyle Teal and bad value? Where is the top 3 Red Sox guys? Like, I understand all of that and I get it. There's a reason when I was looking at these packages that when I was making trade projections, didn't project either of those top 3. Roman Anthony is completely off the table. I think Marcelo Meyer was off the table, but also just not necessarily the guy you want headlining a package right now. I think there's some injury risk there. There's definitely some things that are a little bit of a question mark with him. I don't think Boston wanted to trade him anyways. And then a Christian Campbell, who is, you know, is it fair to say the minor league hitter of the year last year, probably like the best hitter of baseball last year? Right. Player of the year. There you go. Yeah. So that's a guy that like the stock is just too high right now. And I think almost trying to like the Red Sox just trying to justify that just doesn't make sense when you see what he did last year and we see what the fact that he could kind of plug into their infield this year. So the value was good. That's my biggest takeaway. Yeah. I think initially I saw Kyle Teal as a headliner and I was hesitant and I was like, you know, what is that? It doesn't quite make sense. But the White Sox were able to get 2 consensus top 100 hitters, both who have, wherever they end up playing defensively with Teal and Montgomery probably is a right fielder, as we've said. But, you know, wherever they end up playing, you have 2 legit high-end hitting prospects that you added to your system that desperately needed hitting prospects. And then you get a guy that's, you know, we said there needs to be a big league ready piece. It might not be a super exciting piece, but Meadroth is a guy that will play for you this year and have the ability to give you quality major league at bats. And then you get a 4th piece who's fun. You can develop him. You can see what happens on the pitching side. It's pretty good value. I get why people will look at it and say, you know, the White Sox should have got more. Where's the true headliner? Why is the headliner a catcher, right? Like, I understand that aspect of it, but at the same time, like, you have to be realistic with the fact that you're trading a pitcher who is phenomenal. I love Garrett Crochet. I think he is an exceptional pitcher. He has the 4th highest whip in baseball this year among pitchers with 130 innings or more. I mean, this is a guy that could be a high-end pitcher for years to come. He has 2 years of control. He's only been a starter for 1 season, and there is some risk that comes with that. The White Sox were still able to get 2 elite prospects and 2 more pieces that you can hope to be part of the future as well. All in all, I'm okay with that from a trade value perspective.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You cashed in on an amazing year from a first-year starter that I don't think anybody saw coming. I think if you told Garrett Crochet himself that he would be an all-star and throw in 140 plus innings in February, if you told him that in February, he wouldn't believe you. And to have like 13 K per 9, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. Like
we always knew he had good strikeout stuff, but the cutter that he added it made him elevate to an entirely new level. But you said that Teal was a headliner. I would, in my personal opinion, I would call Braden Montgomery the headliner. I think that his ceiling is just so ridiculous that for me, he's the headliner. He's the true prize of the deal. Because Teal, yes, he's gonna be a major leaguer, no doubt about it. But with Montgomery, you're getting like all-star 40 home run ceiling type of player. Teal, yes, he's solid. He's going to be a major league player and probably play every day, if not platooning with Carroll, like we said. But just the upside of Montgomery makes him the headliner for me.
Yeah, I can see that idea. I think you can. I think right now you have to look at Teal as the headliner because Montgomery has not played a single minor league game yet. Right, he's
Yeah,
coming off an injury. He broke his ankle. Right, he hasn't done anything in the minor leagues. Right, so I think that's why Teal is going to be perceived, and he's ranked higher. Right, Teal's generally ranked 20-ish spots higher. I think 20 to 30 spots
yeah,
higher on most top 100 lists. Right, so I think Teal can be looked at the headliner, but in terms of the upside value, I completely agree with you. I think Montgomery is
mhm,
the guy you can look at and say, hey, this guy could be a star. Right, like there's a lot of things that need to happen. He needs to come back. He needs to look good. He needs to make sure his ankle's good, right? Like there's factors, of course, and he's going to have to reduce the swing and miss a little bit, I think, from where he was at in college in terms of translating that to the big league level, right? But at the same time, like that's the guy you can look at and say, hey, like this could be a star right fielder for the White Sox, which is something they haven't had in quite some time. I think the value's there. I'm curious from your perspective right now. Do you think let's fast forward and say we're in 2026? Who starts
all right.
more games behind the plate for the White Sox, Kyle Teel or Edgar Carroll?
I would say Teal only because he's got more experience than Carroll. I think he's what, 2 years older.
Yeah,
He's 23,
yeah, I
22.
think he's
I
maybe
can't remember.
23. Yeah,
He's older than Carroll, which is essentially just that's all I care about in terms of like the experience part because he's got 3 years of college experience and then a full year in the minors. Like he's been catching for longer than Carroll at a professional level. But I would say that if you do something to like what the Braves did with Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud, where it's like a 90-70 split, I don't know if that's the exact numbers, but it was probably closer to 160. But if you just do something like that, I'm fine with that because most good teams have two catchers that they're fine with sticking
yeah,
both behind the plate and in their lineup, and they're like, okay, both of you can catch a good game, call a good game, and hit a little bit. One is usually better than the
sure.
other. I'll use like Will Smith and Austin Barnes as another example. Like Will Smith is obviously the better catcher, but Austin Barnes is still a solid catcher and can still hold his own behind the plate and at the plate.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think right now when you look at the landscape of the league, I think in general, like there is just a lack of consistency from catchers or from most teams, right? Like there's a handful of elite catchers, but like you've got Gary Sanchez out here getting $8.5 million for a year in
Right.
free agency right now to be a backup, right? To be a backup to Adley Rushman, who had a rough year but is expected to be one of the best catchers in baseball, right? So if that's the circumstance and the situation of the catching market, I mean, Kyle Higashioka got a guaranteed $13
Yeah.
million deal with an option for another $7.5 million, right? Like there is catchers there's a need for catching. And I think going
Mhm.
into a rebuild with two top 50 in baseball catching prospects is a very, very good luxury to have because the reality is you don't know exactly when they reach the big league level, are these guys going to pan out as a catcher? Is it
Mhm.
guaranteed that Carroll or Teal are going to be able to handle a big league catching responsibility every day? We don't know that, right? Like we can say we think we know that, and we can say that these guys have developed in the right direction because they both are developing very well. And they're both coming off years that they were incredibly impressive in the minors. We need to see it at the major league level. So going into a rebuild and the next phase of a rebuild with two guys that you can be a legit catcher is not a bad luxury to have, and it's not a bad situation to be in. And I think that the White Sox ultimately said, hey, you don't want to give us your top three. Yeah, we don't need a catcher, but he's the best next player we can get. So if you're not gonna give those top three, right, we will take the 4 and 5 in terms of their
Mhm.
talent and their value, regardless of the positional fit for our roster.
Yeah, and I think that's a solid mindset to have because, like you said, if those three are off the table, I'm perfectly fine with a Teal and Montgomery centered package because Montgomery like I said, he has a chance to fill a hole that has been vacant for 20 years. And if Teal ends up being the better catcher out of Caro and him, sure, that's fine. If Caro ends up being the better catcher, sure, that's fine. They're both on the same team. It shouldn't be like a competition to see who's better now. If one guy is for sure better behind the plate than the other, then fine, stick him back
Right.
there. move the other one to DH, first base, maybe. I'm not sure. I would say if I had to move one to first base, it would be Caro, just because he slugs a bit more and his legs are. I'm not going to say they wouldn't hold up long term, but
Yeah.
first base he would be better suited for over the course of his career.
Yeah, I think that's sound logic. I can understand it for sure. I see the idea of not wanting to necessarily set on one. And I think Caro makes sense as the first baseman, but I also do think that Caro's developed a lot behind the plate, and he's got an
Oh
arm
yeah,
that I think can
100%.
really stick behind the plate too. So I think either way, I think they both should stay catching. I don't see a reason to anytime soon, if hopefully if things go well, where neither of them should stop catching. And I think it's an ideal world, right? Because is Corey Lee really a valued part of the White Sox roster? I don't think so. In which case, like having two catchers that can both play 40+% of the week, like regardless of how the shift is, like I'm fine with a platoon there, and I'm fine with preserving both of them at the young part of their career by not having them catch every day and having both of them be able to play first base and be able to DH. Right? Like the White Sox don't have a set DH. I mean, the White Sox have nobody at DH, right? So like whether it's DH, first base, I mean, I could see a world where 2026 is, one catches 4 days a week, one catches 3 days a week, and then each of them gets a day at first base and a day at DH. Like, sure, cool. I mean, that's something that I would totally be okay with, right? Like, I think you can make it work. And I think at the end of the day, if it was a Kyle Teal versus one of their super young guys, like a Franklin Arias, I mean, I really like Franklin Arias. That might not be the best example, but if it was a Kyle Teal versus like a Miguel Bleis and something else, just to make kind of a deeper package, but Montgomery being the only headliner, like, I'd go with the Teal Montgomery package there, I think, honestly. So,
100%.
I think it makes a lot of sense. I get why some people will not love it. It's a bit of a weird fit, but at the same time, it's pretty good value. And I think the White Sox were never going to get it's just I love to think about it, and it's fun to dream on, right? But I don't think the White Sox were ever getting a Samuel Basallo. I don't think the White Sox were ever getting even an Aiden Miller from the Phillies, right? Like I just don't think that was happening. But now you have two guys that are, they're not top 20 prospects in baseball. I think even Teal on pipeline today is 25. I think that's a bit aggressive, to be honest, in my opinion. But I do think these are both, middle range of the top 100 prospects, right? I think that's very realistic to say. And they're two guys that you can have as, franchise pieces, right? Like the White Sox have what? It depends what list you look at now, but the White Sox have at least 6 top 100 prospects with an argument for 7 or 8. That's
Pipeline
a pretty okay spot to
6. Yeah, Pipeline has 6 and four top 50 too, which is ridiculous.
And I think there's a few places that would have even 7, maybe even at some point soon, potentially 8. So
exactly,
there is work to be done. There's still more to happen, but we're going into 2025 with at least 6 top 100 prospects in the White Sox organization. I'm feeling pretty decent about that, Dylan.
Yeah, it's come a long way since the just Colson Montgomery era of 2021. But I will say one thing, like having 2 good catchers is not a bad thing. Like having 2 people that you can stick behind the plate and that they're going to hold their own. That's a luxury. Not many teams can say that, because that's how you end up with the James McCanns of the world, where they're catching 90, 100 games, and it's not looking that great. But like you were saying, if the package had to be Teal or one of the younger guys like Cespedes, Bleis, whoever, and Montgomery was the headliner, I would take Teal over them any day of the week, because fits the timeline better, and I would just much rather take the safer play in terms of 1, reaching the big leagues, and 2, just becoming an everyday player. We've swung for upside in the past, and I know we can't really. I don't like to use the past rebuild as like pointing as like, okay, it didn't work then, so it's not going to work now, because you really can't do that. It's entirely different. It's a different situation, different GM, entirely different organization, if I'm being honest. But I would still rather take the safe route and just go for the proven will 100% be a big league caliber player in Teal than take a shot in 5 years whenever Cespedes or Bleis is ready. So
yeah, I agree with you. I'm in the same boat there. I think it is a pretty solid deal. What would you say, if you had to give it a letter grade for this deal in terms of what Chris Getz was able to get for Garrett Crochet, what are you giving it?
I said an A-, and I'm going to stick to it. I think it's a win-win trade for both sides, because the Red Sox, they didn't have to give up any of the big 3, and I think that pretty much every player in this deal was expendable for him. I don't know. Maybe you could make a case for Teal shouldn't have been expendable. I know that they've had a streak of rough catching in Boston. I think I saw a tweet that said their last good catcher was Jason Varitek.
I saw
So
it too.
I can believe that. So they're gonna run it back with Connor Wong, but I would say A minus. I think that Teal and Montgomery are fantastic co-headliners. I think that both of them slot in the 2026 opening day lineup, if not sooner. I know that Montgomery, like you said, is going to have to build back up after the injury, but there's an outside chance that he's up late 2025. I think 2026 is when we see the young guys really start to come through in droves, and even if they're not up sooner than that, the Colsons, Hagen, Noah Schultz, like it's going to get real fun here in about 18 months. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting. I think it's going to be a fun team to watch. 2025, the reality is, I mean, the truth of the matter is that you're going to get a roster that's really young and shows some flashes, but struggles for sure. I think it's going to be a rough season to an extent.
It's going to be fun, though. It's going to be fun.
It'll be fun. It'll be more fun to watch 23-year-olds have big league challenges and learn about how to be big league players than it will to watch whatever we watched last year.
Yeah.
It's better, right? It's going to be ugly still, but I do think there is a path forward and a real world where this team can be pretty competitive in a few years from now. There's a lot to be done between now and then. Of course, there's a lot to be done. The team lost 121 games, but there's some steps, there's some building blocks. And I think that this trade is Chris Guess's best move yet, probably in terms of like what he's done for the White Sox. And I do see a path to this team being watchable next year and pretty okay in 2027, 2028 and beyond,
Yeah, I think that in terms of player acquisition, I think that this is his best move, 100%. I think that like the hires that he's made are his best moves. I think the hiring of Bannister and Venable, I think those are like you hang your hat on those moves. But in terms of player acquisition, this is the move where you look back on in 2-3 years and you're like, okay, that was where a turning point was made and we started to go in the right direction. But in 2025, it's going to be, I think it's just going to be better because just regression to the meat. Like we can't possibly be that bad again, right? The bullpen was atrocious. We blew the most saves in MLB history. I know that it like a save is a weird term because like, yeah, it's if you had the lead past like the 5th inning or whatever, but the bullpen was just so bad. And I think just any improvement on that, and you're looking at like another 10, 15 wins, which I know sounds like a lot, but it gets us to like 60 wins, but it's an improvement on 121 losses. I think that anywhere in the 65 to 70 win range, that's a successful season for me. Anything above that, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think that's an optimistic view. I wouldn't be shocked if there was below 100 or above 100 losses again. I think that's not something that would surprise me.
I can believe that.
I know you kind of hinted at that for sure, but it's going to be a fun team. It's going to be a fun team with a lot of young players, and I think this trade pushes it even further towards being a legit, future and a real possibility for this team to get going in the right direction. And I think to his credit, Chris Getz has done a pretty decent job. I think he made a lot of the right hires this offseason, from the coaching staff to the revamping the scouting department to now making this move for Crochet. I think there's a few more moves to come. Mike Tauchman, I don't hate it. I think Mike Tauchman was a pretty good get, actually. Honestly, in terms of a cheap value 1-year deal guy who can perform for you, probably be flipped at the deadline, call it a day. Like, there's some moves happening, and I think the direction is at least established. And now it's like, is there a Luis Robert trade coming? We will try to get into that in the future, but we'll wrap on that. Crochet trade is done. That was step one. I think we both knew this offseason that had to be, it was manager and then it was Crochet. Like those were the two big things to develop, is finding a staff, trading Crochet for prospects. Those were the first step, second step. Both of those are checked off. Do you think Luis Robert gets traded this offseason, or do they take the risk of saying, hey, we can hold off and hope his value goes up, and we're willing to take the risk that if he doesn't perform well in the first half, then his value gets even lower than what it is right now, probably?
I think that he gets traded. I think that the interest level has gone up since the start of the winter meetings. I think that we didn't hear much about him prior to the winter meetings, and now we're hearing like, oh, he's getting a lot of interest. I don't know if that was just Getz drumming up something to get more teams involved. I think that he gets traded. I know that the Reds were a possibility. I saw them listed. I don't know if they have the farm to do it. I don't know what Robert's value is. We know what he can be. We saw what he was in 2024 or in 2023. That was, I don't know if that's the true Luis Robert or if it's somewhere in the middle of what we saw in 2024 and 2023. It just depends on how the White Sox value him and what other teams are willing to give up. Because if they give you I want to say a similar package to Crochet, because I don't think he'll command that much. But if you can get two low level, like 250 to 100 in the top 100s, I think that you have to take that move. I think you don't gamble on it. You don't risk it. I think that if you get a good package, I think you have to take it.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's even that high of value. I think it's going to be a little bit hard to sell teams on Luis Robert, given the injuries, given what we saw last year when he was back from injury. But at the same time, maybe it's like hey, like this guy's going to perform when you put him in a team that's competitive and in a lineup with guys that support him, and having a little more depth of a lineup, right? Like this is a guy that we saw be an elite player in 2023, and he can be that again if you put him in a better lineup in a better situation. So like I can see it going either way. I do think. I don't know. It's not going to happen yet. I think we need to see more happen in free agency. No. Yeah, what I do think with him is like you need to wait a little bit. I think it's not going to be right now. And I think I get the idea of trying to build on the momentum of the Crochet trade and just go for it for here. But at the same time, I also think that Robert, you need to let the market matriculate a little. I think you need to see Santander sign. I think you need to see Teoscar sign. I think some of those guys need to sign first before you can really have teams put their best foot forward in a Luis Robert trade.
I would also wait out to see a potential Kyle Tucker trade, Cody Bellinger trade.
Yep.
Those are like you use that as sort of a reference point to be like, okay, well, Kyle Tucker got whoever, so let's build off of that comparable.
Right, and here, Kyle Tucker is amazing. Obviously, Kyle Tucker is a way better player than Luis Robert, but Kyle Tucker's on a 1-year expiring deal as opposed to Luis Robert, who gives you 3 years of control. So yes, Luis Robert is a lesser player and hasn't proven what Kyle Tucker's proven consistently, but you've got 2 more years of Luis Robert at a pretty affordable price. So if you think you can get him back to being the 2023 version of him, you're getting really good value in comparison to a Tucker deal, which, I mean, Tucker, even on a 1-year deal, is going to command a haul if he ends up getting traded. Yeah. So that's an interesting aspect to follow. But where we are right now, the White Sox traded Garrett Crochet. We knew it was coming. I know fans didn't want to see it. It sucks. It's crappy to see another star player get traded. We don't want this to happen every single July and every single winter. Like, it's a bummer. But the White Sox got pretty good value, and they're heading into the rest of this offseason and into next season with a top 5 or so farm system in baseball. I think that's pretty safe to say at this point. For a rebuilding team that we know isn't going to win, but has set the foundation for the future moving forward.
I think that top 5 is pretty comfortable. I think that with the steps that the farm as a whole took last year, I think that we saw it go from like around 11, 12-ish, and then the additions with the draft. I really like where the farm is heading right now, and I think that in 2026 and beyond, I think we're going to start to see the fruits of all of this labor. And it's going to be fun. 2025, like we said, it's going to be rough. But this Garrett Crochet deal is the start of something that could be pretty fun down the road.
I agree. Well, that'll do it for our emergency edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. We hope this was helpful for getting to know kind of the prospect side of the White Sox, guys that are coming over. It's going to be a fun time, and I think we're going to keep updating. We're going to keep rolling with this. I did a trade write-up earlier that you can find on justbaseball.com. I'm also going to have like a whole piece on like where the White Sox rebuild is at soon. We'll probably talk about that one on the next Roundup episode next week. But until then, we will talk to you later. Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you.